Assalamu alaikum students, welcome back to Prose 2. This is your ENG503 and we've been discussing short stories by Anton Chekhov. Before we got on to the short stories, you will remember that we did a travelogue by Jonathan Swift, which is mostly Swift's idea of reforming contemporary society. And he takes the help of different characters and different incidents to show what things are going wrong in England and how they can be improved. And after the travelogue, we started with the short stories. And one of the things that I pointed out in the introduction to the short story was that currently there are two prevalent forms of the short story. One is the event plot story and the other is the Chekhovian story. And we dealt with short stories by different writers, and I have taken you chronologically through the entire module. Now, it's not possible to cover all short story writers in one module. You have only 32 lectures, and we've done the travelogue also, but my aim is to introduce you to some of the best short story writers so that you can go back and read more stories, not only by the writers that I'm introducing in this class, but also by other writers whom I mentioned in the introduction, but whom we will not be able to cover in the space constraints that we have in this class. So do not please stop your short story or travelogue reading at this point. Go back, read the rest of Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Remember, we only did one voyage. And you can also read up stories by these writers, and you can read up stories by other short story writers, particularly contemporary writers. And you'll find that what I said in the introductory lecture to short stories was very true, and that is that the short story has emerged almost overnight. And it did not take the decades of preparation before you could say that the short story had evolved. It sprang up ready-made. One of the things that you need to remember, and I've emphasized this again and again, is that the short story is basically a narrative that can be read in one sitting. You do not have to read for days on end in order to find out what happens at the end. You sit down to read a short story, and within the space of, let's say, half an hour or 1 hour, you have read through the story, you've passed through all those incidents, you have encountered different characters, and you know how this story is going to end. A lot of the short stories have a surprising ending, in the sense that you read through the story and you expect something to happen, but what actually happens at the end is very different from your expectations. So we did a number of short stories. We did stories by Edgar Allan Poe, we did stories by Mark Twain, and we're on to Anton Chekhov, who has a very strong influence on short story writing. Even the stories that are being written in the 21st century are impacted by what Chekhov wrote in the 19th century. You know that Chekhov is Russian in origin, and that he is a playwright also, and a lot of his plays have been translated into not just English but many different languages. The characters that he uses, the names that he gives them, are essentially speaking Russian. You cannot mistake a character in a Chekhovian short story. So let us see what we have in the first class passenger. Now, before we start off with the text, let me tell you that this is a longer short story than the ones that we did in the last couple of lectures. So I'm going to go a little faster for this short story, because you'll see that there are many more slides here than there were in the previous short stories. Now, before we go into the text, you know that the word passenger is used mainly for transportation from one place to another. It is used for passengers who go by train. It is used for passengers who go by air. You also use it for those who travel by bus. As far as the classes are concerned, and the title of the story is First Class Passenger. So as far as the title of the story is concerned, this passenger is in the first class and not in the second or third or economy class or lower in economy or upper economy. So this is something that you need to remember when we go into the text. A first-class passenger who had just dined at the station and drunk a little too much lay down on the velvet-covered seat, stretched himself out luxuriously, and sank into a doze. Now, this is the difference between the first and the second class. The first-class seats are more comfortable, as he says that it was covered in velvet. It was a comfortable seat, and one of these passengers, he comes into the compartment and sits down and just stretches himself out, because you know that the first class seats are reclining seats. They can be pushed back. There is more leg room, and you can travel more comfortably. So he dozed off, but within 5 minutes he looked at the person who was sitting opposite him. That is, and Chekhov refers to him as his vis-a-vis, who gives a kind of smirk and starts off on a monologue, and he says, "My father of blessed memory used to like to have his heels tickled by peasant women after dinner." You know, sometimes you get tired and you want to have someone tickle you or someone scratch you on the back, and that is comforting. So he starts off by telling about his father, and he says that my father used to have peasant women tickling him after he had had his food, and that is how he would go off to sleep. I am just like him, but with this difference, that after dinner I want my tongue and my brains to be stimulated. Sinful man as I am, I like empty talk on a full stomach. He's a rich person. He doesn't have to worry about where food is coming from. He's just had a very good dinner, and now he says that I like to indulge in idle talk after dinner because I think that that stimulates my brain. One would think that intelligent discussions would stimulate the brain, but here it is the opposite. And one of the things that Chekhov is trying to point out is that these are men who who belong to the higher echelons of society. So he says, will you allow me to have a chat with you? And the vis-a-vis, or the person who is sitting opposite to him, says, why not? And then he says, after a good dinner, the most trifling subject is sufficient to arouse devilishly great thoughts in my brain. So it's the food as well as the idea that they are comfortable, there will be no disturbances, and so they decide that they will start up a conversation. And one of them says that I just saw two young men at the bar, and one of them was congratulating the other on being a celebrity and beginning to win fame. Now these are two very important words in this short story: celebrity and fame. So when they start having this conversation, it is that one of the first class passengers, and you have to remember that both of them are first class passengers, one of them wants to know what constitutes fame, and he says that Pushkin, who is one of the greats of Russian literature and thought, has defined it as a bright patch on a ragged garment, that is a torn garment, an old and worn out garment. When you put a bright patch of cloth on it, that bright patch stands out and nobody sees that the shirt or the trousers are torn and old. People just see that bright patch. So the same definition they both accept, but they say that, you know, if we had this definition, as he says, the means of attaining it might also perhaps be known to us. I must tell you, sir, that when I was younger, I strove after celebrity with every fiber of my being. Now, this is something that is particularly applicable to your generation. We belong to a time and age in which people have, let's say, 15 seconds of fame, or a person becomes a celebrity one day and the next day nobody even remembers his name. So that is your 15 seconds of fame. Chekhov in this story, through these passages, is trying to tell us that fame or celebrity status is something that is temporary. It's a bright patch. For the time being, you focus on that bright patch, but with the passage of time, you start noticing how old that garment is, how old that scarf or shawl or shirt is on which you have this bright patch. So the interesting thing here is that Chekhov does not give names to these two characters. It's just a first-class passenger and his vis-a-vis, the person who is sitting opposite to him. But nowhere in this story does he give any name. Now, they're having a conversation. It's a conversation in a train. There is no relationship between these passengers, and that is why Chekhov just refers to them as a first-class passenger and his vis-a-vis. He doesn't even say a second first-class passenger. He just says one first-class passenger and the person sitting opposite to him. So we will have to conduct this discussion by saying one of them and the other person. So one of the first-class passengers says that if we knew what exactly fame is, then it would not be difficult for us to attain it, because I am one of those who spent his whole youth trying to be famous, trying to have celebrity status. To be popular was my craze, so to speak. For the sake of it, I studied, worked, sat up at night, neglected my meals. And I fancy, as far as I can judge without partiality, I had all the natural gifts for attaining it. To begin with, I am an engineer by profession. In the course of my life, I have built in Russia some 24 magnificent bridges. I have laid aqueducts for 3 towns. I have worked in Russia, in England, in Belgium. Secondly, I am the author of several special treatises in my own line. So a lot of research has been done. One of the first class passengers starts saying, you know, since my youth, I have tried to become famous, and I can say safely that I had all the natural gifts. I was educated, I came from a good family, I am good looking or presentable in appearance. What more can anyone want? Plus, he says, I have built about 24 bridges in Russia. I have laid out aqueducts or water supply systems in 3 towns. I've worked in Russia, in England, in Belgium. I have worked in many different places. And then thirdly, he says, I have from a boy had a weakness for chemistry. Studying that science in my leisure hours, I discovered methods of obtaining certain organic acids, so that you will find my name in all the foreign manuals of chemistry. So he starts off by saying that, you know, I have done such a lot of work, and I have been to many different places. I'm interested in chemistry, I've done a lot of research, I've written research papers, I have published books, and blah blah blah. I have done so many things. I have always been in the service, so he's always been active. I have risen to the grade of actual civil counselor, and I have an unblemished record. So no complaints about me, my character, no complaints about my work. I will not fatigue your attention by enumerating my works and merits. I will only say that I have done far more than some celebrities. And here's the crux. He has done a lot of work. He has done more work than some of the celebrities. So what makes a celebrity a celebrity? What gives an individual fame that overshadows everything else? And he says, I'm in an old age, and yet I am as celebrated as that black dog yonder running on the embankment. It's just a stray dog. Nobody owns him. Nobody is bothered about his breed. So he says, I'm in my old age. I have worked throughout my life. I have built bridges. I have laid aqueducts. I have worked outside Russia. I have worked for Russia. And yet, when I am in my old age, I find out that nobody knows my name. Nobody knows the work that I have done. So I'm as famous as that black dog running on the embankment. And his vis-a-vis says, how can you tell? Perhaps you are celebrated. And he says, well, we will test it at once. Tell me, have you ever heard the name Krikunov? And the vis-a-vis raised his eyes to the ceiling, thought a minute, and he says, no, I'm sorry, I've not heard it. So Krikunov is the name of the engineer. He says, that's my surname. Now you are a man of education. You are well read. You're not like these illiterate people who will never read anything. And yet, you have never heard about me. Now that is proof enough that the world doesn't know me, that I'm not a celebrity. If I were a celebrity, you would know my name. If I were a celebrity, you would know details about my life. But the sad fact is that I am not a celebrity. So his vis-a-vis says, okay, what is the right way to become a celebrity? And Krikanov says, well, the devil only knows. Talent, you say, genius, originality, not a bit of it, sir. People have lived and made a career side by side with me who were worthless, trivial, and even contemptible compared with me. They did not do 1/10 of the work I did, did not put themselves out, were not distinguished for their talents, did not make an effort to be celebrated, and look at them. They're celebrities. The world knows about them. The little children know their names. So it's not work, it's not goodness that makes you famous, that makes you into celebrity, that gives you what is nowadays called star status. Their names are continually in the newspapers and on men's lips. People are talking about them. If you're not tired of listening, I'll illustrate it by an example. So then he says, okay, let me give you an example. The example is, some years ago, I built a bridge in the town of K. Now, he's not giving you the real name of the town. I must tell you that the dullness of that scurvy little town was terrible. If it had not been for the women and the cards, I believe I should have gone out of my mind. So he had to stay there on site while the bridge was being constructed, put together, and then put in place. So he says, I stayed there, but the town drove me mad because of the limited minds of the people. If it had not been for some form of entertainment for women or from the game of cards, I would not have ventured to stay. So he says, people are famous who were with me, who never did any of the work that I did, and yet who enjoyed celebrity status. So he says that I had this one woman in the house who ate and drank, who slept till 5 in the afternoon. It's only at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that she would get up, she would get dressed, and although she was a coquette, she was far more famous. She had the celebrity status that I, with all my work, had not been able to achieve. So what is the reason? What is behind it? People, he says, call her an actress and a singer, but I know that she is neither an actress nor a singer. She just is one of those people who like to display her body, and that has given her fame. She cannot act, she certainly cannot sing, she does impersonations, she copies people. If she's singing, she'll copy a whole song that has been sung by one of the famous singers. If she dances, she's copying someone's dance routine. So as far as I can judge, he says she sang disgustingly. Now that is a very, very strong word to use, but that's the word that he uses for this woman who was his mistress in the town of K. So you don't know what made her famous except for the fact that she displayed her body a great deal. As I remember now, a public ceremony took place to celebrate the opening of the newly constructed bridge, and he's talking about this bridge that he had built in the town of K. So there was this public ceremony for the opening of the bridge. You know, you have public officials, government officials coming in, politicians coming in, the media coming in, the press photographer taking lots of photos, different angles, people gathering together because it's something big that has happened for the city. So he says that this public ceremony, there was a religious service. You know, when we have this kind of thing, we have what we call Quran Khani, we have Tilawat-e-Quran. So there was this bridge that was being opened, and there was a religious service, there were speeches by government officials, there were telegrams of congratulations that were being received, and all the rest of the paraphernalia. Now, Krikunov feels very strongly about this bridge. After all, you know, he has constructed it, so he feels as if it is, as if he is the proud parent, and that's the baby. So the public has come out to see the baby, and it is very natural that if you have parents who are showing their baby for the first time, the public says, oh, such a beautiful baby, and you know, you expected that from such beautiful parents, and the baby looks like the mother, or the baby takes after the father, and you know, he's got beautiful eyes just like the father. So the parents get credit for the baby. Here, let's see what happens. He hangs around, he stands beside the bridge, because there are people taking photographs and people coming in and just looking at the bridge, and there are government officials, and there are people talking about the bridge and saying, oh, this is a wonderful bridge, and our town has become modernized because of the construction of the bridge. And Krikunov says that my bridge was actually a magnificent work. Now that's like saying, that's like parents saying, you know, my baby is beautiful, is the most beautiful baby you've ever seen. So he says, I'm not boasting, but the bridge was a magnificent bridge. It was not a bridge, but a picture, a delight. And who would not have been excited when the whole town came to the opening? And then he says, oh, now the eyes of the public will be on me. Where shall I hide myself? Well, I need not have worried myself, sir. So he thinks that he is going to become famous overnight in this town of K. But what actually happens is that except for the official personages, no one took notice of him. There were people, they were looking at the bridge, they were saying, ooh, this is such a wonderful bridge, what a beautiful bridge, magnificent bridge. But nobody wanted to know who had built it. No one. The official personages knew who had constructed the bridge. But that was it. As far as the general public was concerned, they were not at all bothered. And he says, that was the time when I started to hate the public. I had put in so much work. I had put in days, nights, and what do I get for it? And then all of a sudden, there were these 1,000 voices saying, oh, you know who that is? Charming, bewitching. And who was it that they had noticed? This was the engineer's mistress, the woman who is known as an actress and a singer. Now you know what I mean when I say that these short stories are universal in theme. Nobody knows the name of the engineers who are making all those magnificent buildings. What they do know is the name of the politician who inaugurates that building or bridge or road. We've had a lot of construction going on in Pakistan in the last few years. Does anyone know the names of the laborers who worked there or the engineers who worked? No. You know the name of the person who inaugurates it because he goes and he puts a plaque there. So this actress cum singer, who is actually perhaps just a chorus girl, when she comes in, everybody turns around to look at her. Oh, she's so beautiful. Oh, look at her dress. She looks so wonderful. And what has she done? Nothing. Less than nothing. And when this woman comes up, escorted by these two young, handsome men, people turn around to look at the engineer because she is heading towards Krikhanov and say, ooh, that's the man who is her lover. So he is not known because of the wonderful work that he has done. He is known by her reference. So instead of the woman being known as the mistress of the engineer Krikhanov, the engineer Krikhanov, who's built this wonderful bridge, is known as the woman's lover. So this is when he says, I started to hate the public. You know, everything that I had done, all the days, nights, months that I had put in for that bridge, they were not counted at all. Nobody wanted to know who I was, except when the time came up that the woman came, entered the scene, and everybody started looking at her. Nobody had looked at the engineer. So he says that this is something that was really very, very upsetting for me. And one of the men who was standing with Krikhanov, he says, do you know who that lady is walking on the other bank? That's so and so. Her voice is beneath all criticism, but she has a most perfect mastery of it. So as a singer, she is a flop, total failure. But she's loved, she's famous, she has celebrity status. So this engineer, he says, can you tell me who built this bridge? And the individual says, I really don't know, some engineer I expect. So this is how engineers are treated. And then when he says, and who built the cathedral in your town? And this same individual says, oh, I don't know. So two of the most wonderful constructions in town, and they're not bothered. They just don't care. So then, you know, he takes this sort of test further, and he asks this man, he says, who's the best teacher in town K? Same answer, I don't know. Who's the best architect? Well, you know, I really don't know. And all the questions that he asks, this person says, I do not know. So what does he know? He says, tell me please, whom is that singer living with? And he says, you know, with some engineer called Krikhanov. And he says, well, sir, are you sure? And he says, yes, it's some engineer named Krikhanov. So the fact that he's an engineer, even then the man does not connect two and two. He doesn't add them up. When he does add two and two, he probably makes 8 out of it. So nobody was concerned, nobody was bothered with who had built the bridge. Now, the day after this ceremony, he grabbed up a copy of the Messenger, that is the newspaper, and he started searching for himself. So he spent a long time. He started from page 1, went on to page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then he says that on page 4, I just caught a glimpse of a news item, and this news item stated, yesterday in beautiful weather, before a vast concourse of people, in the presence of His Excellency the Governor of the province, so and so, and other dignitaries, the ceremony of the dedication of the newly constructed bridge took place. Fine. So he comes across this news item, and quickly he starts reading through it, because he thinks that there's going to be his name there, and they're going to mention that the name of the engineer who built this bridge is Krikhanov. And he reads on, and he doesn't find his name. And then what he does come across is this bit. Our talented actress so-and-so, the favorite of the K public, K is the name of the town, was present at the dedication, looking very beautiful. I need not say that her arrival created a sensation. The star was wearing blank, 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 blank. So then you would have details of her dress. So what is it that the newspaper has focused on? Not the work of the engineer, not the bridge itself, but who was there? The governor of the province was there, and this beautiful actress was there. So between them, the politician and the celebrity, or the politician and the chorus girl, define what is celebrity status. Everybody knows that the governor inaugurated it. Everybody knows that this singer come dancer come artist was there. So it says, I consoled myself with the reflection that the provinces are stupid and one could expect nothing of them, and for celebrity one must go to the intellectual centers. So he goes to Petersburg, he goes to Moscow, he goes to Petersburg, where a work of mine had been sent for competition. So when the date approached on which the result was to be declared, he also went from the town of K to Petersburg. It's a long journey from K to Petersburg, and you know Russia is a huge land mass. And so he took his mistress along also, and he says, you know, we enjoyed the journey, we had some good food and good wine, and so we reached Petersburg. He arrives on the day that the result is declared, and he's declared the winner. So the victorious one travels a long way from the town of K to Petersburg to receive the first prize. Next day he went out along the Nevsky. He went out and he bought all the different newspapers that he could see, thinking that his photograph is going to be in it, and there's going to be a news item announcing this prize. So he takes all these newspapers, he goes to his hotel room, and he picks up one newspaper and he goes through it. Flip, flip, flip. 1 page, 2 page, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, forget about it. Maybe this newspaper is biased. He picked up a second one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 pages, and nothing about the prize. In the fourth newspaper, he sees this news item. Yesterday, the well-known provincial actress so-and-so arrived by express in Petersburg. No mention of the engineer, No mention of the person who had received the prize and who had traveled such a long way. They said the beautiful actress traveled to Petersburg. We note with pleasure that the climate of the south has had a beneficial effect on our fair friend. Her charming stage appearance, blank, blank, blank. So this actress, she comes in, she sweeps the town. Petersburg was supposed to be an intellectual center, not the kind of place that you would find in the provinces. But what happens is that even in Petersburg, the news are focused on the fact that this actress has come to town, and they say, oh, you know, we're very glad that the weather is nice and it's not very cold, because we would not like the actress to go back with a negative impression of the town. So he says that in just 2 lines, his award was mentioned, and there was a whole paragraph of the activities of the singer come actress, and to pile shame on sorrow, he says that even my name had been spelt wrong. It's spelled Krikonov, and the newspaper had misspelled it. They had called me Kurkurtlov. So already he starts feeling the impact of not being a celebrity, not being a famous. So much for your intellectual center. So he says even Petersburg is the same. But that was not all. By the time I left Petersburg, a month later, all the newspapers were vying with one another in discussing our incomparable, divine, highly talented actress by her name and her father's name. So no mention of the engineer whatsoever. Although it's the engineer who brings her here, it's the engineer who is feeding her, but there's absolutely no thought, and she reverts back to her Christian name. Some years later, he says, I was in Moscow. I was summoned there by the mayor, and I went because the mayor had been clamoring for public lectures, and so in the middle of my work, I delivered 5 public lectures with a philanthropic object in one of the museums. So that's where he is hosting the public lectures. And he says that the mayor called me, and the mayor advertised the fact that Krikonov would give a presentation. But alas, not a single Moscow Gazette said a word about me. There was something about houses on fire, an operetta, sleeping town councillors, drunken storekeepers, but somehow or the other, there was nothing in the Moscow Gazette about the creature Krikonov. So what he does is he gets into a tram, and he starts asking people certain questions. He says, does anyone here know who is going to be working on the town's projects? And people say, we don't know. And then he says, there's someone giving lectures in such and such a museum. I hear it is interesting. Nobody paid him the slightest attention. They had not heard my lectures. nobody knew about the existence of the museum, all that would not have mattered. But imagine, my dear sir, the people suddenly leaped to their feet and struggled to the windows. And what was it? He says, look, 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 do you see the dark man getting into that cab? That's the famous runner King. And the whole tram began talking about King. This is what was happening in Moscow. So he's been making a comparison of the provinces with intellectual centers like Moscow and Petersburg, and he says, I can give so many other examples. You can think that I am boastful, that I am incompetent, but the thing is, people who have done less than me, people who have made no contribution whatsoever, they are celebrities and nobody knows anything about me. He says, are Russian navigators, chemists, physicists, mechanicians and agriculturists popular with the public? And the answer is no. Do our cultivated masses know anything of Russian artists, sculptors or literary men? No. The answer is still no. Because they're not famous, they've not done anything that will bring them instant fame. Can you mention to me a single representative of our literature who would have become celebrated if the rumor had been spread over the earth that he had been killed in a duel, gone out of his mind, been sent into exile, or had cheated at cards? So you become famous, you become a celebrity only when you do something negative. So what Chekhov is trying to present through the first class passenger is that when you do good work, it's not news. And if you look at it from the journalist's point of view, the point is that good news does not sell. Bad news sells. Somebody commits suicide, somebody is killed in a murder, somebody is killed in a duel, something gets stolen, and you get celebrity status. But if you do good work, if you are a good citizen of the country, you try to help the country in many different ways, nobody is going to notice you. So, and he says, you know, I can quote you hundreds of names who are known to every baby, and they will be what? Singers, acrobats, buffoons, stand-up comedians, performance artists. So all these people, they will be known, but people who are doing good work, who are helping the public, who are contributing to public safety, they are not at all given any importance whatsoever. So meanwhile, he says that a man comes in, looks around, sees both seats occupied, and goes out, and there is this voice from the dark corner of the compartment, the corner that they have not even looked at, and he says, and this voice says, do you know who that is? That is NN, the famous Tula card sharper who was had up in connection with the Y Bank affair. So even a card sharper, even a gambler, one who cheats at cards, is known. And the first class passenger says, see, that's what I mean. A card sharper, a gambler is known. But ask him whether he knows Semiradsky, Tchaikovsky or Soloviev, the philosopher, and he'll say, I'm sorry, I don't know who these people are. And then there was this break in conversation, and the vis-a-vis says, allow me to ask one question. Do you know the name of Pushkov? 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 No, I don't know it. And he says, that is my name. And he's embarrassed. He says, "You don't know my name? I'm a professor at the Russian universities. I have been teaching for 35 years. I'm a member of the Academy of Sciences. I have published more than one work." So, neither knows the other's identity. They're trying to point out shortcomings, weaknesses in the character of the public. But they don't realize until you come to the end of this short story that it doesn't apply only to the general public. It applies to the educated people. It applies to the intellectual, because what it turns out to be is that both of them also know people who are notorious, people like the card sharper, people like the woman who claims to be an actress and singer. They will know their names, but they will not know the names of those who have contributed to society, who have tried to improve the living style of the community. Before we end this lecture, let me quickly run through some of the points that we have been discussing today, and then I will take my leave. Now, when we started this short story, we started with a passenger getting into a compartment and wanting to go to sleep because he's had a good dinner and the seats are comfortable, and yet he wakes up and he looks at the person sitting opposite him and he says, "You know, I would like to have a discussion on something, if you do not mind." And the other person, because they have a lot of time, they are both traveling in a train, so they start talking to each other, not about anything that they consider important, but one of the passengers says that, "You know, I have always wanted to be famous. I have always wanted to have celebrity status, but I have not been successful. Although I'm an engineer," then he tells his name and he says, "I have built about 24 bridges in Russia. I've laid out 3 aqueducts, and I've worked in England. I've worked outside Russia, inside Russia, and yet no one knows me." And he says that the irony is that there was this time that I was living in a town called K, and I was building a bridge there, and because I had to spend some months there, I had a woman living with me who was supposed to be an actress cum singer, and she did nothing at all. I went out early in the morning, I did work on the bridge, I told people what was to be done, how it was to be done, and how the whole thing was to be assembled. But this woman, she slept until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then she got up and she dressed, and she just went out of her house, or she sat in the house and people came to her. And so she was a famous person. She had celebrity status, but he, that is Krikunov, the engineer, he was doing such wonderful work, and yet nobody knew him. So then he talks about this time when the bridge is complete and he's called for the official ceremony of the opening of the bridge, and there are these government officials, and there's a whole crowd of people from the town of K wanting to see this this ceremony taking place and wanting to see the bridge. So they looked at the bridge, and not one of them wanted to know who it was who had built the bridge. And yet he says that when his mistress came onto the scene, everybody turned around and everybody says, "Oh, she looks so beautiful, oh, she's so charming." And then they looked at him, that is the engineer Krikonov, and they said, "He is her lover." So, you know, he gets additional status because of his connection with this woman. There is no recognition of his own work. There's no appreciation or even acknowledgement of the work that he has done. And he says that I thought that perhaps because it was a small town, people had small minds. So then I went to Petersburg and I encountered the same kind of approach. I was given an award, I had won a competition, and yet I did not get my photo, I did not even get the news item of my award in the town's paper. So what he's trying to point out is the indifference, the casual attitude, the almost insularity of the people as far as individuals' emotions and feelings are concerned. They're very careful, very considerate about that particular woman, but they don't show the same consideration for this engineer who's done such a lot of work. So while they're having this conversation, the engineer Krikonov, he becomes very excited, and not only is he excited and tense, but you know, he's getting angry also, and he says, you know, I don't understand this thing about the general public, and I wish that I did. And then there's silence for some time, and during this silence, a man opens the door of the compartment, looks in, closes the door, and goes off. And not knowing who else is sitting in that compartment, they hear a voice from the corner saying that person is a gambler. He cheats at cards. He's a card sharper. So even a card sharper, even a criminal is better known than the engineer Krikonov. So while they're having this conversation, the person who's sitting who's sitting opposite him says, do you know the name of Pushkov? And Krikonov says, no, I don't know any Pushkov. And this other man says, well, Pushkov is my name. I'm a professor. I have been teaching for a number of years at the Academy of Sciences. I've been a professor at one of the Russian universities for 35 years, and you do not know my name. I am a member of the Academy of Sciences. You claim to be a scientist yourself, an engineer, one who loves chemistry, who has studied chemistry and who has done research. You do not know my name. You're an intellectual. What can I expect of the general public in Russia? So it ends on an ironic note. It ends on a sentence that makes us realize that although we like to criticize other people, and it is very easy to criticize other people, if we look within ourselves, if we look deep into our hearts, our thoughts, our minds, we will find that we are the same as other people outside. There is no difference in us whether we are rich or poor, intellectual or ignorant. Our minds work the same way. We grab everything that shows negativity. We're not that keen to embrace positivity. So that a card sharper, a gambler, a part-time singer, actress gets celebrity status, but people who do the good work, they do not get celebrity status. They don't become famous at all. Thank you for being so patient, and Allah Hafiz.